I remember the moment like it happened yesterday. My name's Greg, and this is a story I never thought I'd have to tell. It was just another evening at home, the kind where everything feels routine. I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone after a long day, while my wife Amanda chatted with her sister, Julia, in the kitchen. Their laughter echoed faintly through the house, and I didn't think much of it until I heard it. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Amanda said something like, "If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have dated Greg." It wasn't said with anger or frustration. It wasn't even whispered in secrecy. She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather or a TV show she didn't like. I froze. My thumb stopped mid-scroll, and my brain tried to convince me I'd imagined it. But then Julia said something too low for me to catch, and Amanda's laugh followed. Not the laugh I loved, the one that used to brighten my day, but a nervous chuckle, the kind people use to downplay something they know they shouldn't have said. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I've always been the calm one, the kind of guy who thinks things through before reacting. So, I didn't storm into the kitchen or demand an explanation. Instead, I stood in the doorway, watching them. Amanda must have sensed me there because she turned. Her face was a mix of surprise and guilt. "Greg, what?" she started, but she didn't finish. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask her why she said it. I just looked at her for a moment, trying to find some sort of explanation in her eyes. When none came, I turned and walked away. The door closed softly behind me as I stepped outside. Not a slam, just enough to let her know I was gone. I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, my mind racing. Was this how she really felt? Was it something I'd done or not done, or was it just an offhand comment, something she didn't mean? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I started driving, not sure where I was going. I didn't have a plan, didn't even grab my wallet. I just needed to get away, to clear my head. The silence in the car felt heavy, pressing down on me with every mile. The truth is, I wasn't angry, not yet anyway. I was hurt, deeply. Amanda wasn't the type to throw out careless words, at least not to me. But hearing her say that made me question everything. Our marriage, our connection, even the way she saw me. I replayed the scene in my head over and over, hoping to find a clue that might explain why she said it. But all I could hear was the casual way those words rolled off her tongue, as if they'd been waiting to escape. And that's what hurt the most. Not just the words, but the ease with which she said them. By the time I parked, I realized I wasn't ready to go back home. Not yet. Amanda needed to know how much those words had affected me. But more than that, I needed to figure out what they meant, what we meant. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure. The night didn't get easier after I left the house. I parked in a lot near a park I used to visit as a kid. I sat there, the streetlights casting faint glows through the windshield, trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Maybe Amanda didn't mean it. Maybe it was one of those things people say when they're frustrated or looking for sympathy. Still, I couldn't shake the way she said it. Calm, casual, like it wasn't even a big deal. I tried to think of how we'd gotten to this point. Amanda and I weren't perfect, sure, but who is? I worked hard. I supported her in everything she wanted to do. We weren't the couple who screamed at each other or slammed doors. We got through disagreements with a shrug and a compromise. At least I thought we did. I thought we were fine. I couldn't help but wonder if I'd been blind to something, some sign that she wasn't happy. But when I replayed our last few weeks together, there was no fight, no heated argument, not even a sarcastic jab during dinner. She'd kissed me goodbye that morning before I left for work, the same way she always did. How do you go from that to casually telling your sister you regret ever dating me? I stared at my phone, debating whether to call her. The knot in my chest tightened with every second that passed. Part of me wanted to demand an explanation, but another part wasn't ready to hear whatever she might say. I checked my texts, nothing from her. No, where are you? No, come back. Just silence. I told myself that was fine. Maybe she was giving me space, or maybe she was too embarrassed to reach out. But as the hours crept by, her silence started to sting. I leaned my head back against the seat. Inside, Julia, her sister, was probably trying to talk sense into her, right? Julia knew me. She knew I wasn't some terrible husband. Amanda wouldn't have married me if I was. That thought brought a flicker of comfort, but it was quickly replaced by something darker. What if this wasn't a one-off comment? What if she'd been feeling this way for months, or even years, and I was just too blind to see it? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. No, Amanda wasn't like that. She wasn't cruel or calculating. If she had a problem, she would have told me, wouldn't she? But the truth lingered in the back of my mind. I didn't know. I finally turned on the engine and started driving again, still not ready to go home. My stomach churned as I thought about what she might say when I walked through the door. Would she apologize? Shrug it off like it was nothing? Or would she double down, like she sometimes did when she didn't want to admit she was wrong? I wasn't sure what scared me more, the possibility that she didn't mean it, or the possibility that she did. By the time I pulled into a motel parking lot, I was too drained to think anymore. I checked in and collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence in that room was deafening, but it wasn't the same as the silence at home. This silence felt safer. I told myself I'd figure it out tomorrow, that maybe I was overreacting, reading too much into an offhand comment. But deep down, I knew this wasn't something I could ignore. Amanda had planted a seed of doubt, and it was already starting to grow. The problem was, I didn't know if it would bloom into resolution or destruction. When I woke up the next morning in that dim motel room, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't been home all night. It wasn't a first for me to be away from Amanda, but this time was different. It wasn't a work trip or a guy's night out. I'd left, walked out the door without a word, leaving her to wonder where I was, if she even cared. The silence in the room was heavy. It gave me too much time to think, too much space to let my emotions simmer. I couldn't decide if I was still angry or just numb. The truth is, I'd never been great at letting people know how I feel. I keep things inside, let them stack up like boxes in the attic, figuring I'll deal with them later. But last night wasn't one of those times. I got up, showered, and stared at myself in the mirror for longer than I should have. I didn't look any different, but I felt different, like something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just the husband who always let things slide anymore. I'd heard something I couldn't unhear, and it wasn't going to go away with time or distractions. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts, just the same empty screen that had stared back at me last night. For a second, I thought about texting Amanda, maybe even calling her. But what would I say? Hey, I heard you say you regret being with me, but let's pretend everything's fine. I couldn't do it, not yet. Instead, I scrolled through the messages she had sent me earlier in the week. Just mundane stuff. Can you grab milk on your way home? Don't forget the trash goes out tomorrow. Love you. That last one stung. It was from 3 days ago, and it felt like it had come from someone else entirely. The Amanda who said that couldn't be the same Amanda who'd casually told her sister she regretted ever being with me. Could she? I decided to get some coffee. The act of doing something normal helped steady me, even if just a little. Sitting in the cafe, I replayed her words in my head over and over. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have dated Greg. It wasn't the first time I'd wondered if I was enough for her. Amanda's the kind of person who lights up a room, who draws people to her effortlessly. Me? I'm steady, reliable, the guy who makes sure the bills get paid and the oil gets changed. I'd always worried that one day she might wake up and realize she wanted more than that. But hearing it out loud, that hit different. By noon, I was pacing my motel room like a caged animal. I wanted to go home, but I couldn't bring myself to do it, not yet. I wasn't ready to face her, to have that conversation. So instead, I went for a drive. It was aimless at first, just me and the open road. But I found myself heading toward places that meant something to us. The park where we had our first picnic, the spot by the lake where I proposed, even the little diner where we used to go for pancakes every Sunday morning before life got too busy. Each place brought a memory, and each memory brought a question. Was she happy then, or was she just pretending? By the time the sun started to set, I felt more lost than ever. I pulled into the parking lot of a hotel, paid for another night, and settled into the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I thought about Amanda again, what she might be doing, how she might be feeling. Was she worried, or was she relieved to have some space? The thought of her sitting at home, not even noticing I was gone, made my stomach turn. I checked my phone one more time before turning in for the night. Still nothing. That was when it hit me. For years, I'd been the one to smooth things over, to reach out, to make the first move. But this time I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I had to let her come to me. I thought, if she wants to fix this, she'll have to meet me halfway. But as I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't. I didn't plan on going home that evening, but something in me couldn't stay away any longer. It wasn't a decision, really. It felt more like gravity pulling me back. I walked through the front door, half expecting Amanda to jump up, maybe apologize or ask where I'd been. Instead, the house was quiet, too quiet. She was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee in her hands. When she saw me, her expression shifted, relief, maybe, but guarded. She wasn't rushing over to hug me or beg for forgiveness. No, she was waiting, like this was some kind of standoff. "Greg," she said, setting the cup down. "Amanda." My voice was calm, almost detached. I didn't slam the door or throw my keys down on the counter. I didn't yell. I'd had 2 days to think about what I wanted to say, and I wasn't about to let emotions ruin that. She folded her arms across her chest, her posture defensive. "So, are you going to tell me where you've been, or is this part of the punishment?" Her words were sharp, but there was a nervous edge to them. I took a deep breath, then walked into the living room, sitting down on the couch. I motioned for her to join me, but she stayed where she was. "I needed space," I said finally. "To think. To figure out how to even talk to you after what I heard." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Greg. Are we really doing this? You overheard one thing I said in private to my sister, and now you're acting like it's the end of the world." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "It wasn't just one thing, Amanda. It was the way you said it. Like it didn't even matter. Like I don't matter." She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so now you're the victim? Give me a break, Greg. People vent to their siblings all the time. You weren't supposed to hear it." "That doesn't make it hurt any less," I said, my voice steady. "You don't just say something like that unless you've been feeling it for a while. So tell me, how long have you been regretting us?" Her face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might actually answer. But instead, she deflected. "You're twisting this into something it's not. I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" I asked, my tone sharp enough to make her flinch. "Because when I heard you say it, Amanda, it felt like you'd just thrown everything we've built out the window." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Greg, I was just venting. I didn't mean it. And honestly, if you hadn't been eavesdropping, we wouldn't even be having this conversation." There it was, the deflection, the blame shifting. It was like she couldn't admit that maybe, just maybe, she'd crossed a line. I stood up, pacing the room to keep from saying something I'd regret. "Do you even hear yourself? You're making this about me overhearing you, instead of the fact that you said it in the first place." Her arms tightened around her chest. "Fine, you want the truth? Sometimes I do wonder what life would have been like if we hadn't gotten together. Does that make me a monster? It makes me human, Greg. People have doubts." I stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Doubts are one thing, Amanda. Saying out loud that you wouldn't have dated me if you could go back? That's something else entirely." She opened her mouth to argue, but closed it again, her jaw tightening. For a long moment, the silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I broke it. "I'm not asking you to be perfect," I said quietly. "I'm not even asking you to never have doubts. But if you can't see the damage you've done here, Amanda, then maybe we've got bigger problems than what you said to your sister." Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw something that looked like fear. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice softer now. "I'm saying I need to know if you even want to fix this," I replied. "Because right now, it feels like I'm the only one who does." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked down at the floor, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. Finally, she said, "I don't know." It wasn't the answer I was hoping for, but at least it was honest. And as much as it hurt to hear, it gave me the clarity I needed. "Then I think we need some time apart," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "Figure out what we both want. Because I can't keep doing this if I'm the only one trying." I grabbed my bag from the couch, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. She didn't stop me, didn't beg me to stay. She just stood there, watching as I walked out the door. And for the first time in years, I didn't look back. The days that followed felt strange, like I was walking through someone else's life. I'd left my own home, left Amanda standing there without much of a fight, and now I was in this in-between space where I didn't know what came next. At first, it felt like a temporary move, like I'd just stepped out for a breath of air and would go back once I'd cleared my head. But as the days turned into a week and then another, the weight of my decision began to sink in. Amanda didn't call. She didn't text. There was no late-night apology or dramatic gesture at my motel door. Just silence. I stayed at the hotel for the first few nights, but the sterile walls and stiff sheets only made me feel more untethered. By the weekend, I decided to rent a small furnished apartment, just for a month. It wasn't much, just a place to sleep, eat, and think. And thinking was all I seemed to do. The first few nights there, I couldn't escape the what-ifs. What if I'd stayed and tried harder to talk to her? What if I'd never heard her say those words in the first place? What if I'd been a better husband, more attentive, more exciting, more of whatever it was she thought she was missing? But as much as I hated the silence, it also gave me a chance to reflect on something I hadn't let myself admit before. For years, I'd been the one carrying us, the one smoothing things over, the one making compromises. And Amanda? She took it for granted. That wasn't me playing the victim. It was just the truth. I thought about all the times I'd gone out of my way to make her happy. The late-night drives to get her favorite snacks. The weekends I'd spent painting rooms in colors she insisted she'd love, but then changed her mind about 2 months later. The times I'd bitten my tongue when she said something hurtful because I didn't want to start a fight. And what had I gotten in return? Criticism. Resentment. That offhand comment about how she wouldn't have dated me if she could do it all over again. I wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. But I was there. I showed up every single day, even when it felt like she didn't see me anymore. And now, sitting alone in this tiny apartment, I realized I wasn't willing to keep showing up for someone who couldn't see my worth. It wasn't an easy realization. It came in waves, like grief. One minute I felt empowered, ready to take control of my life and stop letting her doubts define me. The next, I felt like a failure, like I'd somehow let her slip away because I wasn't good enough. On the fourth day, I got a call from her sister, Julia. She sounded hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should be calling me at all. "Greg," she started, her voice cautious. "Amanda's been asking about you. She doesn't say it, but I think she misses you." I sighed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. "If she misses me, Julia, she knows how to reach me." There was a pause. Then Julia said, "You know how stubborn she is. She's not going to make the first move." "And why not?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Why is it always me who has to fix things? Why can't she take responsibility for once?" Julia didn't have an answer for that, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. Julia's call had stirred something in me. Hope, maybe, or frustration. I wasn't sure which. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be the one to reach out this time. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed to see if Amanda cared enough to try. If she didn't, well, I'd know where we stood. The weekend came, and I packed up the rest of my things from the house. Amanda wasn't there when I arrived. Whether by coincidence or design, I didn't know. I packed quietly, methodically, trying not to think too much about what each item meant. By the time I left, the house felt emptier, like my absence had left a physical mark. And as I stood outside, locking the door behind me, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I wasn't going back. Not unless she gave me a reason to. Not unless she showed me that I was worth fighting for. Because for the first time in years, I was finally ready to fight for myself. The days stretched into weeks, and Amanda still didn't reach out, not once. I thought I'd be angry or even relieved, but instead, I felt hollow. It's strange how silence can echo louder than words ever could. At first, I tried to convince myself that she just needed time. Amanda had always been stubborn, and I figured she was waiting for me to make the first move, like I always had. But as the days passed, my hope started to feel more like denial. I kept busy, throwing myself into work and finding small projects to fill my weekends. I fixed the squeaky hinge on the cabinet door in the kitchen of my rented apartment. I started jogging in the mornings, something I hadn't done in years. It felt good, productive. But the silence still followed me, creeping in at the edges of my mind. Every so often, I'd glance at my phone, half expecting a text or a missed call. Even something as small as, "Hey," would have been enough to start a conversation, to crack the wall between us. But nothing came. I thought about calling Julia again, but what would I say? "Your sister still hasn't called me. Is she waiting for a sign from God? Or is she just done?" It felt pathetic, and I wasn't going to let myself go there. Instead, I turned inward. For the first time in a long time, I started asking myself what I really wanted, not just from Amanda, but from life. The truth wasn't easy to face. I'd spent so much time trying to be the husband I thought she needed, bending over backward to meet expectations she never fully voiced, that I'd forgotten about my own needs, my own worth. One night, sitting in the quiet of my apartment, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There we were, laughing at a party with friends, sitting on the beach during a vacation, posing in front of the house the day we got the keys. At first, the memories felt like a weight, pulling me back toward everything I thought I'd lost. But then I started to see them differently. Those moments weren't perfect, but they were real. And in all of them, I could see how much effort I'd put into making her happy. I'd been trying so hard to hold on to something that, in hindsight, Amanda wasn't fully holding on to with me. The realization hit me hard. It wasn't just that she'd said she regretted dating me. It was everything leading up to it. The way she dismissed my efforts, the way she brushed off my feelings, the way she expected me to carry the emotional weight of our relationship while she focused on her frustrations. I couldn't ignore it anymore. As much as I wanted to believe we could fix things, I knew it couldn't happen unless Amanda was willing to meet me halfway. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. Not because I'd moved on, far from it, but because I'd finally allowed myself to let go of the constant need to fix things. For once, I wasn't going to be the one to break the silence. If Amanda cared enough to reach out, I'd be here. But if she didn't, I'd survive. That night, I started packing up a few things in my apartment. Not to move back home, I wasn't ready for that, but to move forward. I boxed up the photos we'd taken together, wrapping them carefully in old newspaper. I wasn't throwing them away. They were still part of my life, but I couldn't keep them out in plain sight anymore. By the time I was done, the apartment felt a little emptier, but also a little clearer. For the first time in weeks, I sat down in the silence and didn't feel suffocated by it. Because now the silence wasn't just hers, it was mine too, and I was learning how to live in it. A few weeks later, I found myself out running errands on a crisp Saturday morning. The air was cool, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't weighed down by the heaviness of what had happened. I wasn't over Amanda, not by a long shot, but I'd learned how to function in the in-between. Then, as fate would have it, I saw her. I was standing in line at a coffee shop, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when I caught sight of her sitting at a small table by the window. She wasn't alone. The man across from her leaned forward slightly, his elbows on the table, his expression warm and engaged. Amanda was laughing, an open, genuine laugh that I hadn't seen in years. It stopped me in my tracks. For a second, I thought about walking over there. Part of me wanted to interrupt, to make her explain who he was and why she seemed so at ease with him when everything between us was still unresolved. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped to the side, staying out of her line of sight, and watched. She looked different. Not physically. She still wore her hair the same way, still had that same sharp but effortless style, but there was something in her demeanor. She seemed lighter, more carefree. I didn't recognize her. The man she was with wasn't flashy or overly charming. He had an easy confidence about him, the kind that didn't need to be loud. He said something that made her laugh again, and my chest tightened. I couldn't stay there. I left the coffee shop without ordering anything, the brisk air hitting me harder than I expected. I wasn't sure what I felt: anger, jealousy, sadness, maybe all of them at once. Walking to my car, I tried to rationalize what I'd just seen. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he was a coworker or an old friend. Maybe this was just Amanda's way of trying to distract herself from everything that had happened. But deep down, I knew better. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. The image of her laughing, leaning towards someone else, replayed in my mind like a loop I couldn't shut off. This was the reality I hadn't been ready to face. Amanda wasn't sitting at home waiting for me to come back. She wasn't drowning in regret or guilt. She was moving on. And maybe, just maybe, she was happier without me. The thought hit me harder than I expected. For weeks, I'd been telling myself that Amanda needed time to figure out what she wanted, that eventually she'd realize what we had was worth fighting for. But what if she'd already decided? I drove around aimlessly after that, my thoughts a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation. But what would I even say? How dare you try to be happy when I'm still here figuring out how to rebuild my life? It sounded pathetic, even in my own head. By the time I got back to my apartment, I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, and let the reality of the situation settle over me. Amanda was moving on. And maybe it was time for me to do the same. It wasn't an easy thought to accept. I'd spent so much time clinging to the hope that we could fix things, that she'd wake up one day and realize she couldn't imagine her life without me. But now, seeing her with someone else, I realized I'd been holding on to a version of Amanda that didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never had. That night, I didn't text her. I didn't call Julia to ask what Amanda was doing or if she'd mentioned me. For the first time since I walked out of that house, I didn't reach for her, not physically, not emotionally. Instead, I let her go. At least, I started to. Letting go wasn't going to happen overnight. I knew that. But seeing her with someone else made one thing clear. She wasn't waiting for me, and I couldn't keep waiting for her. Letting go wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a process. One that dragged me through every stage of grief, often more than once. Some mornings I woke up and thought I could do it, that I could move forward without her. Other days, the weight of regret pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. It wasn't just about losing Amanda. It was about realizing how much of myself I'd given away, how much I'd compromised and sacrificed, all for someone who seemed to barely notice. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I replayed our relationship in my mind, looking for the turning point, the moment when things shifted. Was it gradual, a slow erosion of affection that neither of us noticed until it was too late? Or was there a specific day, a specific fight, when we stopped being partners and started being something less? The more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 little things. The way she used to light up when I walked into a room, replaced over time by a distracted nod. The way we'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing, until our conversations became a series of logistical checklists, groceries, bills, appointments. And then, of course, there was me. I wasn't blameless, I knew that. I'd let myself get comfortable, taking her for granted in ways I didn't even recognize until it was too late. I wasn't the same man she married, the one who made her laugh and challenged her to dream bigger. Somewhere along the way, I'd become someone else, quieter, more reserved, more focused on keeping the wheels turning than enjoying the ride. But even knowing all that, her words still haunted me. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have dated Greg. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself it was just an offhand comment, the sting of those words wouldn't fade. They were too revealing, too raw. They weren't the kind of thing you said unless you'd been thinking it for a while. And if she'd been thinking that for a while, what did that say about everything we'd built together? I started writing in a journal, not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I needed to get the thoughts out of my head. At first, the entries were short and angry, full of blame and frustration. But as the weeks went on, they became more reflective. I wrote about the way I'd felt the first time I saw her, standing in a crowded room and somehow lighting it up all on her own. I wrote about our early days together, when every moment felt like an adventure. I wrote about the little things I missed, the sound of her laugh, the way she used to absent-mindedly play with her necklace when she was nervous. And then, finally, I wrote about what I'd done wrong. It was painful, putting those things into words, admitting that I hadn't been as attentive, as supportive, as loving as I could have been. But it was also freeing in a way. For the first time, I started to see the cracks in our marriage not as failures, but as lessons. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't unsay the things I'd said or undo the things I'd done. And I couldn't make Amanda feel something she didn't feel anymore. But I could change how I moved forward. The weight of regret didn't disappear overnight. It still lingered, especially on the nights when the apartment felt too quiet, or when I caught myself reaching for my phone to text her. But it wasn't as suffocating as it had been. Because now that regret wasn't just about losing Amanda. It was about learning how to be better, not for her, but for myself. For the first time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. The next few months were a slow, uneven road. Every step forward felt like dragging a weight behind me, but I kept moving. Letting go wasn't easy, and it didn't happen all at once. It crept up on me piece by piece, until one day I realized I wasn't checking my phone for Amanda's texts anymore. I stopped expecting her to call, stopped imagining her knocking on my door with some grand apology. That hope, as painful as it was to release, needed to go. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. Not as a husband, not as someone trying to save a marriage, but as Greg. Just Greg. I went back to the hobbies I'd let slip away. Jogging turned into hiking on weekends, and I found solace in the quiet of nature. I picked up my guitar again, fumbling through songs I hadn't played since college. It wasn't about being great at it. It was about doing something that was just for me. At work, I threw myself into projects, taking on challenges I used to avoid. My coworkers noticed, commenting on how focused I seemed. One of them even asked if I'd gotten a promotion. I laughed it off, but it felt good to be seen as someone who had it together, even if I didn't always feel that way. And then there was the moment I knew I was finally starting to heal. It happened on a random Thursday afternoon. I was walking through a park, the kind of place Amanda and I used to go when we were younger, and I saw a couple sitting on a bench. They were laughing, their heads close together, the kind of easy intimacy that used to feel so natural to us. For a split second, my chest tightened. But then, just as quickly, the feeling passed. I smiled to myself and kept walking. It wasn't that I didn't care anymore. I still thought about Amanda sometimes, what she was doing, how she was feeling. But the ache that used to come with those thoughts was gone. I'd stopped looking at our marriage as a failure. Instead, I saw it as a chapter in my life, one that had taught me more than I'd realized at the time. Yes, there were things I could have done better. Yes, there were moments I wished I could take back. But there were also good times, times that reminded me I was capable of love, capable of giving and receiving something meaningful. As the weeks turned into months, I started to imagine a future that didn't include Amanda. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. I thought about what I wanted, not just in a relationship, but in life. I wanted connection, yes, but I also wanted balance. I wanted to be with someone who saw me as an equal, someone who didn't expect me to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wasn't in a rush to find that person. For now, I was content just figuring out who I was and what made me happy. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't the loud, celebratory kind of peace. It was quiet, like a soft whisper in the back of my mind. I didn't need Amanda to come back. I didn't need to rewrite the past or fix what had been broken.